Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're continuing our discussion of Vail Resorts' Tahoe flagship, Heavenly. With Heavenly there's a lot to talk about, so this Insider's Guide is split into 4 parts. In this part we'll cover the Sky and Canyon pod as well as the Gondola and Tamarack areas. If you haven't already, go check out part A to get some great background on Heavenly. So with that, let's continue in Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Heavenly. We'll begin by talking about the best pod on the California side, the Sky and Canyon pod. This area is home to, by far, the most scenic views and runs at the entire resort. It's also home to some of the most monstrous lines you can find anywhere, so make sure to come here early. To recap from part A, you can get here by taking the Powder Bowl lift and skiing down Sky Chute. By far the most iconic run of this pod is the legendary Ridge Run. This is seriously one of the best intermediate cruisers out there, and it offers absolutely breathtaking views of the lake. Ridge Run does start off a bit flat at the top, although you'll definitely still be able to maintain your speed. It only gets steep once you pass the Canyon Express top terminal. Towards the bottom of Ridge Run, you have a few options. You can continue down the main run itself, which will bring you to the top of Mambo. You can also cut skiers left towards Upper Powder Bowl, which brings you to the top of the Powder Bowl run. Upper Powder Bowl is also the home to Heavenly's second terrain park. However, this one's a lot more infrequently built as compared to the Groove Park. My favorite option when it's groomed is to cut skiers left towards the fast Ridge Bowl. Ridge Bowl isn't really much of a bowl, but is a very short and steep groomer that's really fun to straight line. Heavenly in general doesn't really groom any of their black diamonds on a consistent basis, so if you're looking for truly steep groomers, you might want to look elsewhere. Ridge Bowl is the only black diamond at Heavenly that's groomed frequently. Unlike the other 2 runs, Ridge Bowl drops you well below any of the runs in the Powder Bowl pod outside of Maggie's. All 3 of these options mentioned above will bring you to Sky Chute, one of the most congested runs on the mountain. You'll seriously be playing dodgeball with people here throughout the entire day. Ridge Run is extremely popular, so if you're looking to do it, I would head there first thing in the day while the cord is still fresh. High 5 and Canyonland can technically be accessed from Sky Express, however, they're much more practically accessed from Canyon Express. Note that in general, Canyon will always have shorter lines than Sky, so you should take it when you can. Canyonland was formerly the site of Heavenly's infamous High Roller Terrain Park, however, this has been discontinued in recent years. Both High 5 and Canyonland are 2 amazing cruisers that offer more great views of Lake Tahoe. It's worth knowing that High 5 towards the bottom splits up into 2 distinct paths. The path skiers left, which is the one just lookers left of Double Down, is bumped up, and the path skiers right is groomed. The skiers left path is another good place to work on your bump skiing. From High 5, if you cut skiers left back towards Canyon Express, you'll come to Double Down, a very steep mogul run that offers some of the biggest bumps at the resort outside of Gun Barrel. This part of the trail map is a bit weirdly depicted, but there are 2 ways that you can bail from skiing Double Down. Right at the beginning of the run, if you stay skiers left, you'll see a catwalk that leads into the trees towards the flat lower section of Ridge Bowl. If you go a bit further down but still stay skiers left, you'll see another groomed catwalk that leads to the bottom of Sky Chute. This second catwalk is a great way for advanced intermediates to test themselves out on Double Down while still giving themselves an opportunity to bail if things get too intense. I'm probably a bit biased when it comes to Double Down because I got traumatized by it as a kid, but I personally find this run to be steeper than Gun Barrel itself. It's definitely shorter and wider, but it just feels steeper even though I'm pretty sure it's not. Note that the run gets progressively steeper from skiers left to skiers right, with the skiers right offering the steepest pitch and deepest bumps. Moving on to the runs that are exclusively accessible via Sky Express, Liz's is a very fun intermediate bump run. Ski down Ridge Run for a bit and then cut skiers right when you see the sign for Liz's. This run is usually empty since most people at Heavenly stick to the groomers, so it can be a nice place to get some space. I'm not usually a fan of skiing directly under the lift, but Express Line is an exception as the view from this run is nothing short of breathtaking. There's also a bunch of really unique features, including rocks that you'll have to dodge on the upper section, which is the most challenging part of the run. Express Line is definitely one of the most challenging single black diamonds on the mountain. Once Express Line crosses the Ellie's Swing catwalk, which we'll talk about soon, it mellows out significantly. Right before Express Line merges with Sky Canyon, the run steepens again. Sky Canyon is essentially a more mellow alternative to lower Express Line. Sky Canyon can be accessed from Liz's and Canyonland, however it isn't well marked so you'll have to memorize exactly how to get there. Note that past the point where Express Line merges with Sky Canyon, you won't be able to follow the lift line of Sky Express anymore. Both Expressline and Sky Canyon will filter onto the lower half of the California Trail, which you can take back to Sky and Canyon. It's worth mentioning that there's a significant amount of tree terrain between Expressline and Liz's that is home to some of the most pristine tree skiing at the resort. The trees toward the top of Sky Express are really unique and make the place feel like a winter wonderland. There are a ton of unmarked obstacles in this area, however, so be cautious. Ellie's used to be a consistently groomed advanced cruiser at Heavenly, however, the resort no longer does this, which is a bit of a shame as Ellie's offers a phenomenal view of the lake. These days, Heavenly will sometimes groom Ellie's Swing, which is accessible from the top of Ridge Run and then the remaining part of Ellie's. However, this bypasses the steep upper section of the run. Ellie's is a great run and definitely worth doing on a trip to Heavenly, but just don't count on it being groomed. The remaining runs off Sky Express can only be accessed via the Skyline Trail, which leads to the Nevada side. Skiway Glades is an absolutely gigantic glade zone that would take an entire season to fully explore. The pitch here is on the mellower side, but like the unmarked trees between Expressline and Liz's, the snow is usually pretty good and the trees themselves look really beautiful. I've rarely seen anyone actually go down Skiway Glades, so if you're looking for some freshies, this is the place to be. Skiway Glade eventually filters onto Ellie's. Pinnacles is a prominently marked run that gets its name from some huge rock formations on the sides of the run. This run always has bad coverage, so I wouldn't really recommend skiing it until the core season. Despite its prominent entrance, Pinnacles itself is just a fairly standard tree-cut run that offers an amazing view. The middle of the run splits into two distinct paths, with the skier's left path being more wide open and the skier's right path being more narrow. There's another enormous glade zone just lookers left of Pinnacles that would take years to fully ski. This one's unmarked and is another great place to find untracked snow. All runs in the Skypod that are accessed off the Skyline Trail will filter onto the California Trail, which you can take back to Sky and Canyon Express. If you continue to follow the Skyline Trail, you'll eventually arrive at the Nevada side. Note that the Skyline Trail itself is extremely flat and requires catwalking at several points. Before we move on to other parts of the resort, let's talk a few logistics about Sky and Canyon. As I mentioned earlier, Sky generates quite possibly the longest lines at the resort because of how popular the terrain it services is. This is frustrating for most of the day, but it actually becomes a nightmare towards the end of the day. If you started your day on the Nevada side or from Heavenly Village, it's crucial that you get out of the California side as soon as possible, as Sky is the only lift that you can take to Nevada or back to the Central Gondola area. I avoid Heavenly on stormy days for this exact reason, and as such, forgot to mention this in the Hater's Guide video, but wind holds are a severe problem at this resort. Sky is notorious for going down for wind holds midday. If it does, you're really out of luck, so be very careful about traveling between states on stormy days. I would strongly recommend sticking to your state of origin if you're worried about wind becoming an issue. Assuming wind is not an issue though, one last thing worth mentioning is the process of getting out of the bottom of this pod. There's a mini frozen lake at the bottom of Sky and Canyon, and you can see two green lines that merge onto Maggie's. You should avoid these at all costs as they're extremely flat and long. If you're trying to get from the bottom of the Sky and Canyon pod at the end of the day, I recommend taking Canyon up an additional time and then skiing down Ridge Run or any of its three alternatives to reach a run in the Powder Bowl pod. This bypasses the flat catwalk around the lake that you would have otherwise done. Plus, at this time of day, Canyon Express doesn't really get any lines and is usually a walk-on. Now, let's move on to the terrain around the gondola. If you parked in Heavenly Village, the only lift out of town is the gondola. Like I said, I've never actually ridden the gondola during the winter before, but due to the required paid parking, I assume it doesn't really generate that bad of lines. However, know that non-skiers will ride the gondola up for the views and then right back down. The gondola itself offers one of the most scenic rides out there and gets a good way up the mountain. The gondola has a mid-station that serves as an observation deck, but if you're planning to ski, keep riding till the top terminal. The views higher up on the mountain are way better. Note that all the terrain under the gondola is considered backcountry terrain and is known as Firebreak. Firebreak is a legendary zone that can be accessed through a series of gates found in the resort. The terrain here is varied, interesting, and home to some amazing snow. Of course, the area is also extremely avalanche prone, and there are plenty of natural hazards, including creeks, so make sure you know what you're doing before you go through the gates. The top of the gondola gives you access to the Big Easy Bunny Hill. This is definitely one of the better places to learn at Heavenly since it's isolated from advanced skier traffic and is nice and wide open. Finally, let's talk about the main lift in this area. Tamarack services some pretty standard intermediate cruisers. In general, this zone is just kinda mediocre in my opinion. The runs here aren't all that special and tend to get tracked out pretty quick since Tamarack is the main pod that you'll ski through to get to Sky and Canyon. By far the best part about Tamarack is the view at the very top. You'll be able to see both Lake Tahoe and the surrounding desert in one frame. Cascade is the run that goes directly under the lift line and is usually ungroomed. There's a pipe that runs underneath this run, and when the snow hasn't covered it fully, this run won't be open. Sam's Dream is kind of the main cruiser in this pod and offers the most sustained vertical and pitch. The only way to get to 49er from Tamarack is to take this Sand Dunes trail past Comet. However, avoid this at all costs as Sand Dunes is fully uphill. The best way to ski 49er is directly from Comet itself. 49er's grooming schedule is a bit more varied, but on some days it's groomed and on others it's not. For all the runs in the Tamarack pod, keep your speed up as the section before the bottom terminal of the Tamarack lift is extremely flat and slightly uphill. Finally, the trail furthest lookers right of the lift is the California Trail, which we've discussed has the sole purpose of taking you back to Sky and Canyon. This part of the California Trail can get ridiculously congested towards the end of the day when everyone's trying to get back to Sky and Canyon. You will need to pick up some speed though, as once the California Trail turns to skiers left, it becomes ultra flat. You can follow the California Trail all the way back to Sky and Canyon. Recall that we previously discussed the process of getting out of the bottom of the Sky Canyon pod at the end of the day. If you want to avoid that extra step of riding Canyon a second time to get to the top of the Powder Bowl pod, then skiing Maggie's Canyon is a great way to do so. Maggie's Canyon bypasses the flat traverse around the frozen lake and will essentially bring you to the lower half of Maggie's, which isn't that flat. This is not really depicted well on the trail map, but it's by far the most efficient way to get back to California Base at the end of the day. Maggie's Canyon itself is a pretty remote but mellow gladed gully that can hold some good snow. However, the run does face east, so expect some variability. A bit further down the California Trail is the unmarked lower Maggie's Canyon. This is a cool little area that's more wide open than Maggie's Canyon. However, it only filters to the bottom of the Sky Canyon pod and can't be used to bypass the flat lake traverse. Well, that's about it for the Upper California side. Go check out parts A, C, and D now, all about the rest of the mountain. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.